I knew something had shifted the moment Sarah walked into the meeting room. 20 minutes late, she didn't even attempt an apology. As she slid into the chair across from me, her eyes fixed on her notebook. The team fell silent, the previous discussion hanging awkwardly in the air. I waited for her to look up to acknowledge what had just happened, but she simply opened her laptop and asked, "Where are we at?" 12 years we'd worked together. 12 years of building a marketing department from nothing, of late nights and early mornings, of celebrating campaign victories and dissecting failures over cheap office coffee. Now, she couldn't even meet my eyes. "We were discussing the Robinson pitch," I said, keeping my voice steady. "As I mentioned in yesterday's email, we need to pivot the entire approach." Sarah finally looked up, her expression unreadable. "I think we should stick with the original concept." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Everyone knew that I had spent the weekend completely reworking the pitch after our client had expressed serious concerns about the direction. Everyone knew this except apparently Sarah, who had missed the emergency call I'd organized on Sunday. "The client specifically said they want something more conservative," I explained, feeling the eyes of our 5 team members darting between us like spectators at a tennis match. "And I specifically think they're wrong," she replied, typing something on her laptop. "Sometimes clients don't know what they need until we show them." In the past, I might have appreciated her boldness. That was what had drawn me to hire her in the first place. Her unflinching confidence, her willingness to push boundaries. But something had changed in the last few months. What used to be creative friction had calcified into something harder, something personal. "We're not having this discussion right now," I said quietly. "We're going with the new direction. I've already shared the updated brief with everyone." "Except me," she shot back. "You were copied on the email, Sarah." "Right." She let out a short laugh that held no humor. Another decision made without any real consultation. The team shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the first time they'd witnessed this new tension between us, but it was certainly the most explicit. I felt heat rising to my face, not from embarrassment, but from the effort of containing my frustration. For weeks I'd been trying to understand what was happening, why my once trusted right hand had become increasingly combative, dismissive, and distant. "Let's table this and move on to the next agenda item," I suggested, desperate to restore some professionalism to the room. "Kevin, can you update us on the social media numbers?" As Kevin nervously shuffled his papers, I caught Sarah rolling her eyes. Something inside me snapped. "Actually, no." I closed my laptop with more force than necessary. "Sarah, can I see you in my office? The rest of you, take 15. The walk to my office was silent, the corridor stretching longer than it ever had before. Staff members glanced up from their desks as we passed, then quickly looked away. Office politics were like blood in the water. Everyone could sense when something was wrong. I closed the door behind us and gestured for her to sit. She remained standing. "What's going on?" I asked simply. "Nothing's going on, Michael. I just disagree with changing direction 3 days before the presentation. This isn't about the presentation." I ran a hand through my hair. "Something's been off for months now. Every suggestion I make, you challenge. Every decision you question. We used to be partners in this." Sarah crossed her arms. "Partners? Is that what you think we were?" "Yes," I said, genuinely confused. "That's exactly what we were. Partners get equal credit," she said, her voice tight. "Partners get equal opportunities. Partners don't watch their ideas get presented by someone else to the executive team." And there it was, the real issue, finally surfacing. 6 weeks ago, I had presented our department's 5-year strategy to the board. A strategy that Sarah and I had developed together, late nights and weekends, a vision we both believed in. But only my name had been on the meeting invite. "The CEO specifically asked me to present," I said, knowing even as the words left my mouth how hollow they sounded. "And you specifically didn't push back," she replied. "You didn't say, 'Actually, Sarah was instrumental in developing this. She should be in the room.'" She was right. I hadn't said that. I had been so focused on the presentation itself, on making sure our department secured the budget we needed, that I hadn't considered how my silence would be interpreted. "I'm sorry," I said, the words feeling inadequate. "You're right. I should have insisted you be there." Sarah's expression softened just slightly but then hardened again. "It's not just that, Michael. It's a pattern. It's watching you take younger team members under your wing the same way you once did with me, while I'm increasingly sidelined. It's hearing about executive lunches I'm not invited to. It's seeing my role in this department slowly, subtly diminished. I wanted to protest to defend myself, but her words had knocked the air from my lungs. Was that really what was happening? Had I been so blind? The silence between us stretched, filled with years of unspoken grievances and mounting resentments. Something valuable was breaking apart, and I didn't know how to stop it. They say you should never make decisions when you're angry. I spent that night staring at my bedroom ceiling, replaying the conversation with Sarah, wondering when exactly things had gone so wrong. By morning, I had resolved to fix it, to acknowledge her contributions more openly, to advocate for her visibility with upper management, to repair the partnership I had carelessly allowed to erode. But when I arrived at the office, Sarah's desk was empty. Not unusual for a Tuesday, she often worked from home. I texted her, "Can we talk today? I've been thinking about everything you said." 3 hours passed with no response. When my phone finally buzzed, it wasn't Sarah but Tom Grayson, our CEO, requesting an immediate meeting. Walking into Tom's office always made me nervous, despite my 15 years with the company. Today, something felt different. The usual friendly greeting was absent. Instead, he motioned silently for me to sit. "Michael," he began, his expression grave, "I've just had a very concerning conversation with Sarah." My stomach tightened. "About what?" "She's filed a formal complaint against you with HR." He pulled out a folder and opened it. Allegations of professional sabotage, taking credit for her work, creating a hostile work environment. The room seemed to tilt. "That's absolutely not true," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Tom sighed. "She's provided a detailed account of instances going back 18 months. Projects where she claims you presented her ideas as your own. Meetings where she says you deliberately undermined her authority with the team. Tom, you know me. We've worked together for 15 years. Do you honestly believe I would do something like that?" He didn't answer immediately, which felt like an answer itself. "What I believe doesn't matter. HR has to conduct a full investigation. In the meantime, they're recommending you two be separated. Sarah will be temporarily reporting directly to me." I felt like I'd been punched. "So she goes to HR with accusations that aren't true, and she gets promoted to working directly with you?" "It's not a promotion, Michael. It's a temporary arrangement while this is sorted out." "And what about the Robinson pitch we're presenting on Friday?" "Sarah will handle it." I stood up abruptly. "She wants to use the original concept that the client already rejected. She showed me the revised approach this morning. It's quite good. My revised approach. My work that I had spent the entire weekend developing. Now Sarah would be presenting it as her own." "This is exactly what she's doing," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "She's manipulating the situation, turning things around to make it look like I'm the one taking credit for her work when it's the opposite." Tom's expression hardened. "Be very careful about making counter-accusations, Michael. This is precisely the type of response that could validate her claims about a hostile environment." He closed the folder. "Take the rest of the day off. Come back tomorrow with a clearer head." I walked out of his office in a daze, feeling the curious eyes of colleagues following me as I collected my things and left the building. Outside, the spring air felt too sharp, too bright. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, hands gripping the steering wheel, unable to process what had just happened. That evening, my phone lit up with a text from Kevin. "Hey boss, just checking you're okay? Office was weird today. Let me know if you need anything." I started typing several responses before deleting them all. What could I say? That the person I'd mentored and trusted for years had effectively declared war on me? That I was facing an HR investigation based on lies? That I suddenly felt like a stranger in the company I had helped build? Sleep eluded me for the second night in a row. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and began documenting everything. Every project Sarah and I had worked on together. Every email where I had acknowledged her contributions. Every instance where I had advocated for her advancement. If this was going to become a battle of narratives, I needed to arm myself with facts. By morning, my resolve had crystallized. I would not be pushed out or diminished by false accusations. I would fight back, professionally, methodically, with integrity. The office felt different when I returned. Conversations stopped when I approached. People avoided eye contact in the hallways. Word had clearly spread, though God knows what version of events they'd heard. Sarah was nowhere to be seen, working from Tom's office, apparently. My own team seemed uncertain, watching me with a mixture of concern and wariness. I called them together mid-morning. "I know there are rumors circulating," I said, looking at each of them. "I can't discuss the details, but I want you to know that I value each of you and the work we do together. Nothing about that has changed." Kevin spoke up. "Is Sarah coming back to the team?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "For now, we need to focus on our ongoing projects. Speaking of which, I understand the Robinson pitch has been reassigned." Uncomfortable glances were exchanged. "Sarah asked us to meet with her this afternoon to finalize it," said Rachel, not quite meeting my eyes. "I see." I swallowed hard. "Well, she has my notes and the revised concept. Just make sure the client gets what they actually asked for." The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and email exchanges, all conducted with the strained politeness of people walking on eggshells. By late afternoon, I was mentally exhausted. As I was preparing to leave, Rachel appeared at my door. "Michael, can I talk to you for a minute?" I gestured for her to come in, noticing how she carefully closed the door behind her. "The meeting with Sarah about the Robinson pitch. It was strange," she said hesitantly. "She presented the revised concept, your concept, but there were a few moments where she seemed unfamiliar with some of the rationale behind certain decisions." I nodded slowly. "And?" Rachel fidgeted with her sleeve. "Kevin asked about one of the strategic choices and she couldn't really explain it. Then she got defensive, said something about how this concept wasn't her first choice anyway, and that she would have done it differently." "I'm not surprised," I said quietly. "The thing is," Rachel lowered her voice, "Tom was there. He noticed. After Sarah left, he asked us who had actually developed the revised concept. We told him the truth." A small spark of hope flickered. "Thank you for telling me this." After she left, I sat at my desk for a long time, turning this new information over in my mind. Perhaps the truth would come out on its own, or perhaps this was just the beginning of a much longer, more painful battle. Either way, I couldn't help feeling that something fundamental had been broken, not just between Sarah and me, but in the culture of trust we had worked so hard to build in our department. Friday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. The Robinson pitch would be happening without me. I had prepared some reports for my other clients, determined to stay productive despite the cloud hanging over me. As I reviewed the numbers, my office phone rang. My heart jumped when I saw Tom's extension. "Can you come to the conference room?" he asked without preamble. "The Robinson team is here for the pitch and they're asking for you." My confusion must have been evident in my silence. "Michael, did you hear me?" "Yes," I managed. "Why are they asking for me?" "Apparently, Mr. Robinson specifically requested your presence when Sarah began the presentation. He said you had spoken directly about the revisions." I felt a wave of vindication wash over me. "I'll be right there." The conference room fell silent when I entered. Sarah stood at the head of the table, presentation slides projected behind her. She looked like she hadn't slept. Mr. Robinson, a gentleman in his 60s with shrewd eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, nodded at me. "There he is," he said warmly. "Now we can proceed properly." I took a seat at the far end of the table, nodding politely to the Robinson team. Tom, seated near Sarah, gave me a look I couldn't quite interpret. "As I was saying," Sarah continued, her voice tight, "the revised concept addresses your concerns about the conservative approach while still maintaining the core messaging." Mr. Robinson frowned. "Yes, but when Michael and I spoke on Monday, he explained the strategic shift in much more detail. I'd like to hear his perspective on how this addresses our regional market considerations." A moment of tension stretched across the room. Sarah's knuckles whitened around her marker. Tom's gaze darted between us. "Perhaps Michael could join you at the front to co-present?" Tom suggested smoothly. Sarah's expression flickered with something close to panic. "I'm not sure that's necessary." "Actually, I think it's an excellent idea," Mr. Robinson interrupted. "After all, you're a team, aren't you?" And just like that, I found myself standing beside Sarah, picking up the presentation thread as if we had planned it this way all along. Years of working together kicked in, the professional muscle memory of countless pitches. I explained the strategic elements she had glossed over. She elaborated on the creative executions I hadn't seen. From the outside, we probably looked like the perfect team, but I felt the tension radiating from her, saw the slight tremor in her hands as she advanced the slides. This woman who had accused me of sabotage and theft of ideas was now forced to share the spotlight in a pitch she had tried to claim as her own. When it was over, Mr. Robinson shook both our hands. "This is exactly why we value your agency. The synergy between you two is remarkable." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. As the clients and our team filed out, Tom asked us both to stay behind. The door closed, leaving the three of us in a triangle of unspoken accusations. "That was a commendable save," Tom said finally. "But it doesn't resolve the underlying situation." Sarah stared at the table. I waited. "I've spoken with HR," Tom continued. "They've reviewed the initial documentation from both sides and interviewed several team members." He turned to Sarah, "Including some revelations about the origin of the revised Robinson concept." She looked up sharply. "I never claimed it was entirely my work. You didn't correct the assumption either," I pointed out quietly. "Oh, that's rich coming from you," she snapped. "After years of—" "Enough," Tom interrupted. "Here's what's going to happen. The HR investigation will continue formally, but in the meantime, I've made a decision about the department structure." My stomach clenched. This was it. One of us was about to be sidelined or worse. "The marketing department is being split into 2 divisions," Tom said. "Creative and strategy. Sarah, you'll head creative. Michael, you'll lead strategy. Equal positions, separate teams, both reporting directly to me." The room fell silent as we both processed this information. "You're rewarding her," I said finally, unable to keep the disbelief from my voice. "I'm not rewarding anyone," Tom replied firmly. "I'm making a business decision that acknowledges both your contributions while creating some necessary distance. The truth is, you both have tremendous value to this company, but whatever happened between you has made your current arrangement untenable." Sarah spoke up, her voice unexpectedly small. "The teams, how will they be divided?" "You'll each select your core team members, with my approval," Tom explained. "No poaching each other's essential personnel." My mind was already racing. Kevin would stay with me. Rachel too, probably. But others, people I had trained and mentored, might choose Sarah. The thought felt like a betrayal. "And clients?" I asked. "We'll need to evaluate case by case. Robinson stays with both of you for now, given what just happened. Others will be assigned based on needs and existing relationships." Tom stood, signaling the end of the discussion. "I expect you both to handle this transition professionally. Whatever personal issues exist need to be set aside for the good of the company." He looked at each of us in turn. "Am I clear?" We both nodded mutely. After Tom left, Sarah and I remained, separated by 3 feet of polished conference table and miles of damaged trust. "This isn't what I wanted," she said at last. "What did you want, Sarah? To push me out? To take over completely?" She shook her head. "I wanted recognition. I wanted to stop feeling invisible. So you went nuclear. Filed false allegations." "Not false," she countered, meeting my eyes directly. "Perhaps exaggerated in places, but not invented. You have blind spots, Michael. Big ones." I wanted to argue, to defend myself again, but exhaustion won out. "Well, congratulations, you've got your own division now." As I stood to leave, she said, "This split, it doesn't have to be adversarial." I paused at the door. "You made it adversarial the moment you went to HR instead of talking to me." I looked back at her. "We could have fixed this, Sarah. Together. Like we used to fix everything." Walking back to my office, I felt oddly hollow. Not victorious, not defeated, just empty. The landscape of my professional life had fundamentally shifted. Relationships would be redefined, loyalties tested. The department I had carefully built over 15 years would be divided, its culture forever changed. I closed my office door and sat down heavily in my chair. On my desk sat a framed photo from last year's holiday party. The whole team, arms around each other, Sarah and I in the center, laughing at some forgotten joke. I turned the frame face down and began making a list of who I would ask to join my new team. 2 weeks into the department split, my office phone rang. A call from Sarah was the last thing I expected. "The Robinson account is spiraling," she said without greeting. "They're asking for changes that contradict the strategy we presented." I leaned back in my chair, surprised by the "we." Just days ago, we'd been locked in a battle that had torn our department apart. Now she was calling as if we were still collaborators. "What kind of changes?" I asked cautiously. "They want to completely rework the visual identity, make it more edgy after all. Mr. Robinson's son has apparently joined the conversation and is pushing for something that appeals to a younger demographic." I suppressed a sigh. Client families and their internal politics were always challenging. That directly contradicts what his father wanted. "Exactly. Which is why I'm calling. We're meeting them tomorrow at 11. I need you there." The word "need" hung between us, an acknowledgement of dependence that seemed out of character for the new Sarah. "I'll check my calendar," I said, even though I knew I was free. A small, petty part of me wanted her to sweat for a moment. "Michael," she said, her voice tightening, "this is a major account for both our divisions. I know, I'll be there." After hanging up, I stared at the newly rearranged office space. Glass partitions had been installed down the center of what used to be our open floor plan. My strategy team on one side, her creative team on the other. We could see each other working but remained separated, a physical manifestation of our new reality. Kevin knocked on my door frame. "Was that Sarah?" "News travels fast." He shrugged. "Rachel was on the client call when Robinson Jr. started making demands. She said Sarah looked like she might have a stroke." I smiled despite myself. Sarah had always been a purist about design integrity. Having a client's son suddenly demand a redesign would be her personal nightmare. "We're meeting them tomorrow, both teams." Kevin raised an eyebrow. "Both teams? That'll be interesting." "Professional? It'll be professional," I corrected. "Right." He lingered at the door. "By the way, the team was wondering if we're still doing Friday drinks tomorrow. It's been a tradition for so long, but with everything changing." The question caught me off guard. Friday drinks had always been our department ritual, a chance to unwind, celebrate wins, commiserate over challenging clients. Would Sarah continue it with her team? Would we have separate events now? The thought of our team divided into two competing happy hours seemed absurd. "Let me think about it," I told Kevin. "I'll let everyone know tomorrow." That night, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Holiday parties, team outings, impromptu celebrations in the office. Sarah was in almost all of them. In one, taken about 3 years ago, we were presenting an industry award we'd won together, both of us beaming, holding the trophy between us. Had the cracks already begun then? Had I already started taking her for granted? The Robinson meeting the next day was tense but productive. Sarah and I sat on opposite sides of the table, but as the discussion progressed, we found ourselves falling into our old rhythm. When Mr. Robinson's son, Alex, pushed for a complete redesign, Sarah diplomatically suggested a refresh rather than an overhaul. When he insisted, I stepped in with data showing how drastic rebrands often alienate existing customers. Together, without explicitly coordinating, we guided the conversation toward a compromise, updating elements of the visual identity while maintaining the core that Mr. Robinson Sr. had approved. Afterward, as we gathered our materials, Alex Robinson approached us. "Dad said you two made a good team." I didn't believe him at first, but I get it now. He grinned. "It's like watching a choreographed dance. You don't even need to talk to know what the other is thinking." Sarah and I exchanged a brief glance. If only he knew. Back at the office, I found Rachel waiting anxiously by my desk. "How did it go?" "We reached a compromise. Alex gets some of the edgier elements he wants. The senior Robinson keeps the conservative foundation he prefers." "No, I mean..." She lowered her voice. "How was it working with Sarah?" I considered the question carefully. "Professional. Almost like old times." Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "About Friday drinks. People have been talking. Both teams. Nobody wants separate events. What do they want? They want things back the way they were, or as close as possible." She hesitated. "We all know something happened between you and Sarah, but for the rest of us, we're still one department at heart, just with a weird new floor plan." Her words settled on me with unexpected weight. In my focus on the conflict with Sarah, I had overlooked how the split affected everyone else. People who had worked side by side for years were now officially separated, their relationships strained by institutional barriers neither group had asked for. "I'll talk to Sarah," I found myself saying. I caught up with her as she was heading to her car that evening. The parking lot was nearly empty, the sunset casting long shadows across the asphalt. "Got a minute?" I called out. She paused, keys in hand. "Is this about the Robinson Compromise? Because I think It's about Friday drinks." "Oh," her expression shifted. I wasn't sure if that was still happening. "That's what I wanted to discuss. The teams, both our teams, don't want separate events. They want to keep the tradition going, together." Sarah leaned against her car. "And how do you feel about that?" It was a direct question, the kind we used to ask each other all the time before everything changed. "I think they're right," I admitted. "What happened between us shouldn't punish them. They didn't choose this division." She nodded slowly. "The usual place?" "The usual place. I'll send out the email to everyone." As I turned to go, she called after me. "Michael, today with the Robinsons, that felt good, working together like that again." I couldn't bring myself to fully agree, but I couldn't deny it either. "It was effective," I offered. "Effective," she repeated, a faint smile touching her lips. "That's a start." Friday drinks that evening was a strange affair. Both teams arrived tentatively, unsure of how to navigate the new dynamic. But as drinks flowed and conversations sparked, the invisible barrier between strategy and creative began to blur. I watched from a corner table as Kevin and one of Sarah's designers argued passionately about a campaign, their debate more collaborative than combative. Rachel sat with Sarah's assistant, heads bent close, probably sharing office gossip. Sarah eventually made her way to my table, 2 whiskeys in hand. She placed one in front of me without asking. She still remembered my drink. "They needed this," she said, nodding toward our mingling teams. "We created a good culture," I acknowledged. Before, I trailed off, not wanting to reopen wounds that had barely begun to heal. "Before I blew it up?" she finished. I shrugged. We both played a part. We sat in silence for a moment, watching our teams, our people, rediscover their connections despite the artificial boundaries we'd imposed. "Tom asked me today how the new structure is working," Sarah said finally. "If it's sustainable long-term." "What did you tell him?" She traced a finger through the condensation on her glass. "I told him it's functional but not optimal. That splitting complementary functions might look good on an org chart, but in practice, it creates inefficiencies," I finished. "Exactly." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly for what felt like the first time in months. "So where do we go from here, Michael?" That question, "Where do we go from here?" lingered between us long after the Friday drinks had ended. I spent the weekend turning it over in my mind, examining it from every angle like a complex puzzle missing crucial pieces. Monday arrived with a fresh complication. I walked into the office to find Tom waiting by my desk, his expression serious. "Morning meeting in 15 minutes, he said. "My office. Just the department heads." "All of them?" "Just you and Sarah." Something in his tone made me uneasy. Tom wasn't one for unnecessary meetings. If he wanted to speak with both of us, something significant was brewing. Sarah was already seated when I arrived, her posture rigid, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Tom gestured for me to sit, then closed his office door. "The quarterly numbers are in," he began without preamble, dropping a folder on his desk. "They're not good." I reached for the folder, flipping it open to scan the figures. Client retention had dipped. Project profitability was down. Timeline overruns had increased by 15%. Sarah leaned over to look, her shoulder nearly touching mine as she studied the same dismal indicators. "This is the first quarter since the department restructure," Tom continued. "I understand there's an adjustment period, but these trends are concerning." "We've been managing," I said defensively. "The Robinson account alone has required significant additional resources." "The Robinson account is one client," Tom countered. "This spreadsheet shows issues across the board. Projects that previously would have flowed smoothly between strategic planning and creative execution are now getting bottlenecked at the handoff point. Communication gaps are creating inefficiencies." Sarah straightened. "We're working on improving the transition processes." "It's not about processes," Tom interrupted. "It's about the artificial division of work. that naturally belongs together. He looked between us. I supported this restructure because I believed it was necessary to address the personal conflict between you two. But I can't justify it at the expense of our business performance. The implication hung heavily in the air. Either we found a way to make the division work, or what are you suggesting? I asked carefully. Tom leaned back in his chair. I'm giving you both 2 weeks to present a solution. Either find a way to make these separate departments function cohesively, or propose a reintegration plan. Reintegration? Sarah echoed. You mean going back to a single department? Yes, but with a clearly defined leadership structure that works for everyone. Tom's gaze was steady. I can't have my top people at war with each other. It's affecting the entire company. After we left Tom's office, Sarah and I stood awkwardly in the hallway, the quarterly report clutched in my hand like evidence from a crime scene. We should talk, she said quietly. Conference room 3 is empty. We sat at opposite ends of the table, the physical distance between us a reflection of everything that remained unresolved. Through the glass walls, I could see our teams watching curiously. Do you think we can fix this? She asked bluntly. Which part? The departmental structure or the other thing? Both. They're connected. I spread the quarterly report on the table between us. These numbers don't lie. The division isn't working. And the other part? Her voice had lost its usual sharp edge, revealing a vulnerability I hadn't heard in months. I took a deep breath. I've been thinking about what you said. About feeling invisible. Sidelined. The words were difficult to push out. I didn't see it. Maybe I didn't want to see it. She nodded slowly. And I should have talked to you directly instead of letting it fester. Going to HR the way I did. She paused. It was extreme. It was. But I felt I had no other option. Like you wouldn't really hear me otherwise. The statement stung, but I couldn't dismiss it outright. Had I become so unapproachable, so blind to her frustrations? We need to be honest with each other, I said finally. Completely honest, even if it hurts. Otherwise, we'll never move forward. Sarah took a moment before responding. Okay, here's my truth. I felt like you stopped seeing me as an equal. Like at some point I transitioned from your partner to your subordinate. You started making unilateral decisions, taking credit for our joint work, putting yourself forward while I remained in the background. I wanted to protest, to defend myself, but I forced myself to listen. When the board presentation happened, it wasn't just about that single instance. It was the culmination of a pattern I'd been watching develop for years. Her voice grew softer. Do you know what hurt the most? That you didn't even seem to notice what was happening. It wasn't malicious, you genuinely didn't see it. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. My turn for uncomfortable honesty. I've always respected your work, I began carefully. Your creative vision, your dedication to our clients. But there were times when I felt I needed to take control of situations, to make executive decisions without extensive consultation. She frowned. Why? Because sometimes your perfectionism slowed us down. Because occasionally your creative vision didn't align with strategic necessities. Because I hesitated, then pushed through. Because as department head, I felt the ultimate responsibility for our successes and failures. So you didn't trust me, she said flatly. I trusted your abilities, not always your judgment. She flinched as if I'd struck her. At least that's honest. You asked for the truth. Sarah stood and walked to the window, her back to me. Outside, rain had begun to fall, streaking the glass with diagonal lines. Our teams had returned to their work, though I noticed occasional glances toward our conference room. When I started here, she said without turning, you told me you saw potential in me that others had missed. That you believed I could be more than just a good designer. I could be a leader. She finally faced me. What changed? The question caught me off guard. What had changed? When had I stopped viewing her as the rising star I'd once championed? Maybe I got comfortable and I admitted. Maybe I started taking your contributions for granted. Or maybe I struggled to articulate the thought forming in my mind. Maybe I felt threatened. Her eyebrows rose. Threatened? By me? You were getting noticed. Clients started asking for you specifically. The executive team mentioned your work in company-wide emails. I shrugged, uncomfortable with my own admission. You were outgrowing the box I'd put you in. So you pushed me back into it. Not consciously, but perhaps that's what happened. We sat with that revelation, its implications rippling through our shared history. Where does this leave us with Tom's ultimatum? She asked eventually. I glanced down at the quarterly report. The numbers don't lie. This separation isn't working for anyone. So, reintegration. I think so, but with changes. Sarah returned to the table, pulling a notebook from her bag. What kind of changes? For starters, more clearly defined roles. Areas where each of us has final say. She nodded, making notes. And transparent credit for work. If I contribute significantly to a project, that should be acknowledged, especially with upper management. Agreed. And regular check-ins between us, not just about projects, but about the working relationship itself, so issues don't fester. For the next hour, we outlined a framework for a reunified department, one where leadership was shared more equitably, where our complementary strengths were leveraged instead of competing. By the time we finished, the rain had stopped and late afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the conference room. Do you think it can work? Sarah asked, looking over our notes. I don't know, I answered honestly, but I'd rather try than continue with what we're doing now. She nodded slowly. Me too. As we gathered our materials to leave, she paused. One more question, and I need complete honesty. Do you still trust me? Not just my abilities, but me? I considered the question carefully. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend easily. The accusations she'd made to HR still stung. The division she'd helped create had damaged the department we'd built together. I'm working on it, I said finally. Trust is earned back one day at a time. She accepted this with a small nod. Fair enough. I'm working on it too. We walked out together, our teams watching with curious expressions as we emerged side by side from a meeting that had lasted far longer than anyone had expected. The news spread through the office like wildfire. Marketing would be reunified. Sarah and I presented our plan to Tom the following day, and he approved it with minimal changes. The physical barriers, those ridiculous glass partitions, would come down over the weekend. By Monday, we would be one department again, though with a new dual leadership structure clearly outlined on the company org chart. Everyone seemed relieved. Everyone except me. Despite the logical solution we'd crafted, despite the honest conversation with Sarah, I still felt unsettled. Something fundamental had shifted, and I couldn't quite grasp what our new reality would look like. The Friday before the official reunification, I stayed late, watching the maintenance crew dismantle the partitions that had divided our space. Each panel removed felt symbolic, though of what I wasn't entirely sure. Redemption? Second chances? The inevitable circular nature of corporate restructuring? It looks bigger without the walls. Sarah's voice came from behind me. I turned to find her standing in the doorway, bag slung over her shoulder as if she'd been about to leave but had paused at the sight of me. It is bigger, I replied. It's the size it was always meant to be. She moved to stand beside me, both of us watching the transformation of our workspace. Are you ready for Monday? As ready as I can be. You? Nervous, she admitted, but in a good way. Like starting something new but familiar. I nodded, understanding the sentiment perfectly. The team seems happy about it. They are. Rachel told me they're planning a small celebration on Monday morning. Donuts and coffee before the official announcement. We stood in companionable silence watching the last panel being carried away. With the barriers gone, I could see the entire floor clearly for the first time in weeks. My desk at one end, hers at the other, the team spaces flowing together in between. I've been thinking, Sarah said suddenly, about what you said regarding trust being earned back one day at a time. And I want to start earning it. Now. Tonight. She turned to face me directly. There's something I never told you about the HR complaint. My body tensed involuntarily. What about it? I withdrew it 2 days ago. The information took a moment to process. You withdrew the complaint? Why? She shifted uncomfortably. Because parts of it weren't entirely fair. I was angry and hurt, and I exaggerated some things. The admission hung between us, weighty and significant. Which parts? The accusations about you deliberately undermining my authority, taking credit for my ideas. She looked away. Those were more about how I felt than what you actually did. And feelings aren't always accurate reflections of reality. I absorbed this information slowly, its implications rippling through me. Why tell me this now? Because if we're starting fresh on Monday, I don't want this hanging over us. I don't want you wondering what I said or didn't say. She met my eyes directly. And because it's the right thing to do, I didn't know how to respond. Part of me felt vindicated, relieved that the professional damage to my reputation might be mitigated. Another part remained hurt that she had escalated our conflict to that level in the first place. "Thank you for telling me," I said finally. "It means something." She nodded, accepting my limited response. "See you Monday?" "See you Monday." The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. I revised department protocols, updated project timelines, and drafted a joint email with Sarah announcing the reunification to our clients. By Sunday evening, I felt mentally ready for whatever the new week would bring. Monday morning, I arrived early to find the office already buzzing with activity. True to Rachel's word, boxes of donuts and carafes of coffee had been arranged on the central table. Team members mingled freely, the invisible dividing line between strategy and creative erased along with the physical barriers. Sarah arrived moments after me, pausing briefly at the door as she took in the scene. Our eyes met across the room, and she gave a small nod of acknowledgement before being pulled into conversation by Kevin. Tom's official announcement came at 10. He gathered everyone in the now spacious central area, Sarah and I standing on either side of him. "As you all know," he began, "we've decided to reunify the marketing department under a new leadership model. Michael and Sarah will be co-directors, each with distinct areas of authority, but working in tandem to ensure seamless integration of strategy and creative." Murmurs of approval rippled through the assembled team. "This decision wasn't made lightly," Tom continued. "It came after careful analysis of what works best for our clients, our company, and you, the people who make this department exceptional." He went on to outline the new structure, the revised reporting lines, the expectations for the transition period. I scanned the faces in the crowd, noting the expressions of relief, curiosity, cautious optimism. "Finally," Tom concluded, "I want to acknowledge the maturity and professionalism shown by Michael and Sarah in navigating a difficult situation. Their willingness to put aside personal differences for the good of the team exemplifies the leadership qualities we value at this company." The irony of being praised for solving a problem we had created ourselves wasn't lost on me. As the team applauded politely, Sarah caught my eye and gave a small, wry smile that suggested she felt it too. After Tom left, the team lingered, seemingly reluctant to disperse. There was a collective energy in the room, a sense of anticipation and possibility. "Should we say something?" Sarah murmured, stepping closer to me. I nodded. "Probably should." We moved to the front of the room together, and conversations gradually quieted as attention shifted to us. "So," I began, suddenly unsure of what to say. How did one address a division that had been both professional and deeply personal, that had affected so many people beyond just the two of us? "So," Sarah echoed, equally hesitant. Then, with more confidence, "We owe you all an apology." Surprised murmurs rippled through the group. "What happened between us affected each of you," she continued. "You were caught in the middle of something that should have been resolved differently." I picked up the thread. "The separation wasn't fair to any of you. You didn't choose it, but you had to live with the consequences. And you adapted," Sarah added. "You found ways to work across the divide we created. In many ways, you showed more leadership than we did." I surveyed the room, meeting the eyes of people I'd worked with for years, some who had chosen my team in the split, others who had gone with Sarah. All of them now watched us with guarded optimism. "Moving forward won't always be smooth," I acknowledged. "There will be adjustments, growing pains. But we believe, that we're stronger together than apart. We're not asking you to pretend the division never happened," Sarah said. "It did, and it changed things. But maybe some of those changes were necessary. Maybe we all learned something about what matters, about how we want to work together." Kevin spoke up from the back. "Does this mean Friday drinks are officially reinstated as a department tradition?" Laughter broke the tension, and I found myself smiling genuinely for what felt like the first time in months. "Absolutely. First rounds on the leadership team." As the group dispersed to their desks, Sarah touched my arm lightly. "That wasn't so bad." "No," I agreed. "It wasn't. We should probably figure out how this co-director thing is going to work in practice. Coffee later to strategize? The suggestion was casual, collegial, a return to our old rhythms but with new awareness of the pitfalls we'd encountered. That would be good, I said. The Robinson team is coming in at 2. We should align before then. She nodded. My office or yours? I glanced around at the unified space, at the blending of our teams already happening naturally around us. How about the conference room? Neutral territory. Neutral territory, she repeated with a small smile. For now. As she walked away, I realized that what I'd been feeling wasn't just uncertainty about our new professional arrangement. It was recognition that relationships, even work relationships, are never static. They evolve, sometimes break, and occasionally rebuild into something different, but potentially stronger. The partition walls were gone, but their ghost remained, a reminder of what happens when communication fails and resentment builds. Our challenge now wasn't just to manage a department together, but to build a partnership that could withstand the inevitable strains of working so closely together. It wouldn't be easy. Trust, once damaged, takes time to repair. But as I watched our reunited team settle back into their work, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not for a return to what we'd had before. That was impossible. But for something new, something honest, something durable. The quarterly numbers would eventually improve. Clients would be satisfied. Projects would flow more efficiently. But the real measure of our success would be whether Sarah and I could truly rebuild what had been broken between us. Not just for the company's sake, but for our own.